can't hear. So,
Good evening, everyone. This meeting of Rotary Club of Kochi is called to order. It's good to see you all, though. So we said we'll have some meetings on Zoom so that even those who are outstation could attend. Uh, well, one of the things that I think today you open the newspapers or you talk, the line of conversation is only 3-4 things. One, of course, if it's restricted to Kerala, it becomes the, silver line, gold line, silver line, whatever line you want to call it. Then, of course, you have Sri Lanka and Ukraine hogging the headlights. And, of course, the constant monsoon or rain alerts and weather warnings that come on. So we will be today, we are very happy to have with us Dr. Jayakishan, who is going to be speaking to us about the Sri Lankan issues and his observations based on his, long experience and stay in Sri Lanka. But more of that later. We'll come to that. Let me formally welcome Dr. Jayakishan to our midst, and we are very happy to have him with us. And I know we are waiting to hear you. A few other issues. One, of course, as I mentioned in the last meeting, but there are more. There are plans, or the committee has been formed to see whether our RI district needs to be split, because there are some clubs that feel that it has become too large and they may need to, we may need to form separate districts. Well, you would have heard rumors of this going on, but now after the last meeting, the district governor has formed a committee which he'll head along with the immediate past district governor, then DGE, DGN and DGND. They will be looking at these aspects. The basic information we have received from the district directorate will be emailed to you, circulated to you all for information. May I also request all those members who have not yet remitted the additional payment of rupees 3,000 that we had asked, because we have started physical meetings and we're going to have a couple of dinner meetings before the Rotary year ends. Just a polite reminder, please do so as soon as possible. And we are tentatively, we are planning a dinner meeting on the 2nd of June. Instead of this particular month, we are doing it on the 2nd of June. We are planning it. And we hope to see in larger numbers, where we also hope to induct a new member. And because the schools are going to open, our projects are, the notebooks projects is on. We are getting the notebooks ready for distribution. And we also looking at the midday meal scheme is to take off. So I would request all Rotarians to be generously contribute to the midday meal scheme. While some of you have contributed, we are looking for always additional amounts so that we can look after the schools that we have been looking after in a much more better way and give them a little more allowances. We are also planning we have found the suitable people. We identified some people who will be providing the Jaipur food. This being done with the Coimbatore Club with Rotary, which is organizing it. We have sent the details. We'll come to know when we got to send them so that they can be fitted out of the Jaipur food. We have also got a request for a hearing aid from one of the needy persons in Chellanam area. We are looking into it, details of it. Some of you would have been aware that we had got a request from one of the teachers who's retiring from one of the schools. She wanted to hire 1 or 2 rooms to start a nursery school. We had preliminary round of discussion. The Balbound director and I had discussion with her. It said the details, but now somehow possibly because she was starting it too late and couldn't get all the municipal permissions, etc. She has regretted that she would not be doing it this year. Maybe she'll look at it the next year round. Cancer care again is the one. While there have been generous distributions, we have also got some more requests from our counselor to help one of the patients in our area who probably needs to undergo even a surgery. So I would request you all to contribute to the cancer care so that we can look after all these schemes. That's generally the inputs that we have. Any members guess?
We have Ajit Bopan. Ajit
Yeah,
Bopan
okay.
is the chairman of MN Holdings.
Okay.
We
Yeah,
hope to
past
have Ajit
president,
join the club.
Sorry, past president Sujit Vasudevan would like to introduce Rotarian past president Dr. Girija. She is joining us from Manipal. She's the past president of Rotary Club of Manipal. She is classmate, my classmate, Vijaya's classmate, and the classmate, a speaker's classmate. We're all together for the last so many decades. Unfortunately, she has to leave at 7:15 for another very important personal function. So I request the president to kindly excuse her at that point in time. Thank you.
Yep, most certainly. Welcome, past president Dr. Girija. Welcome, Ajit Bopan. Welcome to our midst once again. And may I now request past president Dr. Sujit Vasudevan to kindly introduce today's speaker to us. Over to you, Sujit.
President, Vice Admiral Muralidharan, Rotarians, fellow Rotarians and guests, I deem it a great privilege and honor to be able to introduce this old friend of mine. For the last 52 years, much to his dismay, we have been good friends. He hails from Perambra, from a very aristocratic royal family. The deep roots in Perambra. Perambra is a town near Calicut. And though now there is nobody there directly related to him, they run several charitable programs in Perambra. Jayakrishnan or Ailyat Gosalakal Jayakrishnan, called as JK or JN, had his MBBS with us in Kasturba Medical College, Manipal, and did his MS in general surgery from Kasturba Medical College, Mangalore, following which he left for Ireland and got his fellowship of the Royal College of Ireland, of Surgeons of Ireland, in general surgery, and subsequently his fellowship in the Royal College of Surgeons in cardiothoracic surgery in the UK. He has worked in major hospitals in Ireland and the United Kingdom, including the iconic King's Hospital in London. He is a trained cardiothoracic surgeon with over 10,000 difficult procedures, cardiac, thoracic, and vascular, to his credit, with excellent results. He has worked in India. He came to Mangalore and started, along with some partners, the Omega Hospital, where he still works. He has worked as assistant professor associate professor in surgery in K.S. Hegde Medical College. He has worked in Trivandrum in the SUT and PRS hospitals. He has worked in Bahrain. He has worked in Nigeria, though he has omitted that from his CV, says that's a different story. Another 40 minutes he'll require for that. And the reason he is here today is because of his Sri Lankan connection. Initially, he used to travel from Mangalore and Trivandrum and go to Sri Lanka and do surgeries and come back. Ultimately, he moved to Sri Lanka and joined the prestigious Navaloka Hospital in Colombo, which is a top-notch hospital catering to VIPs. Being the good surgeon that he is, he has seen both outside and inside many VIPs and politicians and ministers, and has rubbed shoulders with the like of Ranil Wickramasinghe and Mahinda Rajapakse. He had a brilliant career there, but I think because of COVID, he returned and is now back at Mangalore. He's an excellent surgeon for which many people will vouch. In addition, that is an excellent human being. He's interested in a vast number of topics. He is a very avid golfer. And this year, when he celebrated his XX birthday, I mean, ages cannot be revealed here, his sons gave him a special treat by taking him to Scotland and allowing him or giving the chance to play on the greens in St. Andrews, which is considered as the home and the temple of golf. So it's a great treat for JK. He is very well known in his academic circles. A well-known surgeon. He is a much sought after speaker and orator at international conferences and has published several papers. He's married to Shubha and they have 3 children, 2 sons who are super specialist consultants in the UK and a daughter who's HR executive with Unilever in Mumbai. We had a choice of asking him to talk about cardiothoracic surgery or about Sri Lanka. I thought with his contacts in Sri Lanka, the constant touch he has got with the people there, probably more aware of ground realities than many of us. So that's why I requested him to talk on this. Again, I said I'm very, very privileged to introduce and welcome Dr. Ailyat Gosalakal Jayakrishnan.
Over to you, Dr. Jayakrishnan. Please unmute yourself and yeah.
Does it come through?
Yeah, it's coming. It's just coming.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
okay.
can-
Now, yeah.
It's all right, isn't it?
Yeah, now it's okay.
Yeah, okay. Right. So thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen and members of the President of the Rotary Club of Kochi, all the Rotarians and guests of the Rotary Club of Kochi. First of all, let me thank Sujit for the superlative introduction that he has made. I'm not sure whether all the adjectives used are appropriate. However, I thank you, Sujit. And as he said, we have been very old friends and friends for a very long time. Sujit called me last week and asked me, can you give a talk on Zoom to the Rotary Club of Cochin? And I immediately said yes without thinking much, because I assumed that he will ask me to talk on bypass surgery or some such topic, which was not much of an issue because I have given so many talks and I just need to fish out the talk from my laptop. Then he said, no, not that. Why don't you talk on Sri Lanka? So that was a bit of I took a few seconds, but then I said, yes. I don't know whether I regret that or whether I can do justice to that, but I will definitely try my best. And when I thought about it, I thought, yes, I do have a very long association with Sri Lanka. So at least let me share it with those who are interested in listening to me. So Sri Lanka, of course, you have titled it as the Sri Lankan Imbroglio, which is probably what is happening there now is really an imbroglio. But when I thought of it, I thought, let me put my own title. I called it Sri Lanka, is it a paradise lost? Will it be regained? We all hope it will be, but I just put a topic like that. Sri Lanka has been known by many names over many centuries. It's known as an Emerald Isle. It is also known as Serendip, which means an island. In Tamil, it is known as Ilankai. It is known as Lakdiva. And I will talk about it. There are many other names as well for Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is indeed a paradise. It's a very beautiful country, and you can travel within Sri Lanka. Is not a huge area. It's just about a little bigger than Kerala. From the mountains to the seashore, within 4 to 5 hours, you can go from a very beautiful mountain resort to the beaches. And in between, there are very verdant the countryside, and it's really a paradise on earth. So I just collected a lot of rich wildlife. And, it's something which most visitors fall in love with when they visit Sri Lanka and carry back very fond memories. So before going into the real economics and the politics, I thought we should have some idea about the people and the nation of Sri Lanka. This is the Sri Lankan flag. What you hear is the lion, but it's a very irony that there are no lions in Sri Lanka. So why do you have a lion on the Sri Lankan flag? Because it is said that when King Vijaya came from India came to Sri Lanka, he carried the standard. His standard was a lion, and ever since they have been using the lion as on their flag. And a lot of the teams are known as Sri Lankan Lions. And then when I first wondered, I was looking for lions. When I was told that, no, there are no lions in Sri Lanka. Anyway, there were tigers, of course. That's a different type of tiger, not the real tiger. And initially it was only the central part with the maroon color and the lion. Later, the green and the saffron were added, green for Muslims and saffron obviously for Hindus. So that, it is in the 1950s or something that they added these two stripes. And of course, there are 4 bow leaves on 4 sides. The bow tree is a very sacred tree for Buddhists. And that too, this tree was carried by Sangamitra, who was the daughter of King Ashoka when she went to Sri Lanka in the 3rd century BC. And it's a very revered tree. Everywhere you find bow trees, even in hospitals, they have a bow tree with a statue of Lord Buddha beneath that, and where everybody prays before they start their daily work, which is a very good custom. Just to give you a rough idea, I'm sure most of you know this, the land area of Sri Lanka is about 65,610 square kilometers as compared to Kerala, which is only 38,000 square kilometers. The population of Sri Lanka is 22 million. Kerala is 36 million. So it's almost double. The density of population is almost double. Sri Lanka is 435 kilometers long and 240 kilometers wide at its widest point. Kerala is 580 kilometers long, and of course, between 30 to 100 is the shortest point probably there. And like somebody referred to the K line, this 580 kilometers, hopefully we will cover it in 4 hours or 3 hours or something like that when the silver line comes into being. That is the hope anyway. So this, and of something which you should know is that 70% of Sri Lanka is Buddhist. 13% are Hindus, and 10% are Muslims, and 6% are Christians, all denominations of Christians. So that is the ethnic distribution of the population. The original inhabitants of Sri Lanka were known as the Vedas, which is, we all know that we also have the Adivasis and things like that who have been inhabiting the land for very, very long time. It's a very small group, now only 2,500. It is not exactly, the numbers are not there, but probably between 2,500 to 6,000 Vedas still existing. They have a Veda king, and nowadays they have a lot of traditional medicine they use for curing illnesses and all that. And occasionally the Veda chief is given some ceremonial importance, and some of his pronouncements are occasionally listened to, not very seriously. So as I said, Buddhism came to Sri Lanka in the 3rd century BC, introduced by King Ashoka's son Mahinda and daughter Sangamitra. And I said Sangamitra and Mahinda were sent to Sri Lanka by Ashoka to propagate Buddhism. And it was Sangamitra who carried the sapling of the boa tree and planted it there, and it spread all over there. So, but again, this Sri Lankan Tamils also came to Sri Lanka at around the same time in waves of immigration from South India. Some argue, or some say that the Tamils were the original inhabitants of Sri Lanka. Anyway, that's a matter of debate, which I don't think will ever be solved. The Tamils claim that they were there. Singalas are not descended. Singalas were after the Tamils, and the Tamils came before that. But an interesting fact about the Tamils is that the Tamils itself, there are 2 types. They are known as, one is known as Sri Lankan Tamils. These are the Tamils who came to India in the ancient times from 3rd century BC onwards and settled down there. They became Sri Lankans, but Tamils. Then there is a newer wave of immigration, mainly brought in by the British. They are brought in as laborers by the British for the tea estates. These are known as Indian Tamils. So even again, I was very confused between this. What do you mean by Indian Tamil and Sri Lankan Tamil? Later, I realized that this was the difference. And these Indian Tamils, the laborers who were taken mainly to the estates in Nuwara upcountry, they are known as upcountry Tamils. And in fact, they also have their own political party called Ceylon Workers Congress. And these Tamils are really not totally gelled with the Sri Lankan Tamils, and these Tamils were not really part and parcel of the LTTE. And many of their leaders have been ministers in various cabinets. One Tondaman family from Nuwara who have been ministers for a very long time. They joined both UNP and SLFP or whichever it is, somehow they are in power. Mostly it is laborers, tea estate workers who live in the upcountry or the area around Nuwara and mainly working as tea estate. Of course, now things have changed. They have also got educated and migrated, but this is the original Indian Tamils. Then, of course, we have the Christians, which are the Portuguese, the Dutch and the British ruled Sri Lanka for 443 years. And after they left, many of their descendants, they are known as burghers. There are Christians, of course, there are normal Christians, and the burgher is not a hamburger or something like that. It's a term used to describe like Anglo-Indian. It's a term equivalent to an Anglo-Indian. They are known as burghers. They're a very rich community, very educated community, and mostly of Dutch descent. And even their names are of Dutch origin, like Kerkhoff and Van Hoven. And you have names like that for many of the Sri Lankan Tamil Christians. I mean, many of them, a vast majority have migrated to Australia, New Zealand, UK, and mainly to Australia and of course to USA. But there are quite a few remaining. They are also in fairly good positions. Most of them, not all of them. They have their own peculiar diet and their habits. And it is somewhat similar to the Goan. All of Sri Lanka has got a similar Goan culture, but these have more of that culture. So on a personal level, I have been associated with Sri Lanka since 1994. I was invited there by my junior colleague who was junior to me in the UK, who went back and settled in Sri Lanka. And he asked me initially to come and help him out to do some difficult surgeries, and started traveling. I was in Trivandrum at that time. I traveled to Sri Lanka from Trivandrum on a weekend, about alternate weekends or something like that. Went on a Friday and came back on Monday early morning. And the flight from Trivandrum to Colombo is only 30 minutes. Before we could put the seatbelt on and have a cup of coffee or something, you are already in Colombo. It worked very well. There were times I remember I left home at 8:30 in the morning and I was in the operation theater by 10:30 in Colombo, and we could do 2 surgeries after that. It was that close. And so that is how it started. Then after a couple of years, my friend left the job. Suddenly he said, I'm leaving. So I was left sort of holding the baby. So the management asked me, can you take it up full time? I said, no, that's not possible because my family was in India. We had come back from UK with the idea of settling back in India. And if I say I'm going somewhere else, my wife would have kicked me out of the house because the children had to be educated. She wanted the children to be educated in India. So I can't, move that. Anyway, so I said no, but then they said, you please keep coming. So that went on for a long time, and almost 15 years, and it went on quite well. And I was fortunate because I was personally, there was no other many cardiac centers at that time. But gradually more and more centers came up. So obviously a visiting surgeon sort of lost his demand gradually. So I stopped for some time. Then in 2016, they again called me back and said, please come back for full time. So then I took the plunge. I was getting old. I said, if I don't do it now, I will never do it. So let me take up this opportunity. I thought it was I loved Sri Lanka. So I didn't want to miss that opportunity. It was almost like a home away from home for me. So I said yes, and we went there, and we were there for 4 years. So I've done about more than 3,000 cardiac operations in Sri Lanka. And as Sujit said, including many senior politicians, ministers, cricketers. Sri Lanka is a very, very closed, small populations. Everybody knows everybody. And there is no, like as prime minister will just walk into your cabin and say, I'm Mahinda, and without much ado, there is no huge, there'll be one security. Or you might find Sanat Jayasuriya just gives you a call and said, Doc, can I meet you tomorrow? And he will just come alone without any fan following or anything like that. So things were very, very simple there. So I did enjoy my time. It's a very good hospital setup. And I did enjoy my time, and I'm very happy that I was able to do a lot of cardiac surgeries for the Sri Lankan people. To know the history of the economy, why the economy has been badly, you have to go back a long time. It's a series of natural disasters and mismanagement which happened. The first thing, of course, the major disaster which happened was the tsunami, the Indian Ocean tsunami in December 2004. I show this site particularly because the Rotary Club, I was in India just after the tsunami. I got a call from one of my friend's mother, my colleague's mother, who is a very active Rotarian, said, look, there is a major problem here, and we are in the Northeast. Colombo and South was well taken care of. Northeast is where the Tamil areas are. There is no relief, and can you help us by sending some doctors? So I was in Mangalore, and I had no means of suddenly assembling some doctors on my own. So I needed an organization to support me. So my first thought was to call this my friend, Mr. Radhakrishnan, who was the past president of the Rotary Club of Calicut. I told him, Radhakrishnan, somebody has called me, can you do something? He didn't think even for a minute. He said, yes. He said, what you have to do is take 5 or 6 doctors and take whatever supplies, medical supplies you can go to Colombo, and they will take care of you. He delivered within no time. Within 3 days, he had everything ready. Of course, the visa and tickets were all arranged from Colombo, and they did a wonderful job. They went to the Northeast, and this is Mr. Ravindra. He's the past international president of the Rotary. Many of you may be familiar with him. And that is me, of course. We had after the event, we had a meeting in the Taj Samudra in Colombo. You can see the devastation. And this is the clinic or where they had the medical camps and support for all the people who were really suffering at that time. You can see the amount of devastation that has happened. The funeral pyres were lit in open ground, houses and buildings were smashed. And actually, we went for a camp in Batticaloa recently. Recently means about 5 years ago. But this scene is still there. Even after so many years, the damage is still visible. And this is our team, which we went there. 30,000 fatalities. In the second highest, the tsunami was in Sri Lanka. The highest was Indonesia, and India had about 18,000. And 1 billion in assets were lost, and 300 million was lost in potential output. These are very damaging things to happen to a country, and recovery will have to be slow. And this particular museum, I visited there. It is a very touching depiction in photographs of what happened that day. And on a personal level, I operated on a 28-day-old baby who was brought to me, and her name was Tsunami. So I asked them why Tsunami. She said she was born on that day, and they named her Tsunami. And they came for a checkup for 2 years. After that, I don't know what has happened. But anyway, she did extremely well. So she belongs to somewhere in that area where the worst of the tsunami was hit. So this is important. A lot of fatalities in human terms, 1 billion in assets that washed away, and 300 million in potential output also. They were recovering from that. But then there were one of the most scathing comments which I came across recently was Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore. His comments on Sri Lanka. Lee Kuan Yew has visited Sri Lanka many times. He has got a very deep insight into Sri Lanka. You all know he is the master man who made Singapore what it is. He has been accused of many things, being a dictator or whatever it is. But then his insight is, I sort of read it. I think I would agree with him. He always said Ceylon was Britain's model Commonwealth country. Ceylon had more resources and infrastructure than Singapore. The decision taken by SWRD Bandaranaike to make Sinhala the national language was the beginning of the unraveling of Ceylon. That is absolutely true. It was a very, very incorrect decision. One fine day, Bandaranaike was a very Oxford-educated sort of dapper, he called him a dapper young gentleman who will be very fitting in any Englishman's club. But his ideas when he got power was totally different. He said Sinhala only. A whole generation of Sinhalese students there lost their opportunities. None of them could speak. Even I know few people who cannot speak English properly. So their opportunity to mingle with the outside world was lost. He called Ranasinghe Premadasa, who was a very strong prime minister after a few years after Banda. He's a Sinhala chauvinist. His decision to remove Indian soldiers brought down by the Jayawardene Raji Pact, which was known as the IPKF, was an insensible decision. I don't want to comment on that, but that is Lee Kuan Yew's comment. Many Sri Lankans were not in favor of IPKF. So Ranasinghe Premadasa took a very populist decision. As for Mahinda Rajapaksa, who just has left the prime ministership, Mahinda Rajapaksa thinks he has finished the war. I have read his speeches. I knew he is a Sinhala extremist. That is also his view. And again, he won purely on a Sinhala populist vote without any substance. He's a very popular politician, very, very good orator in Sinhala. No country which has sizable minorities can prosper by suppressing any one minority. He says, I never did this in Singapore. Singapore is Chinese dominated, but he never deliberately suppressed the Tamils or the Malays. He gave them opportunities. I mean, they might not be 100% equal. Unlike in Malaysia, Singapore, the non-Malays and the non-Chinese are very, very almost equal citizens. So he says you cannot suppress minorities and hope to have a good, successful country. And finally, he says Sri Lanka failed because it had wrong and leaders, wrong and unworthy leaders, I think it says. So what led to the economic debacle of Sri Lanka? According to me, it is an overdependence on overdependence on imports of essential goods. Of course, everybody imports some luxury goods. But if you have to import sugar, if you have to import rice, if you have to import milk, that is for your daily sustenance, and you cannot sustain it for long. But Sri Lanka, in spite of being a fertile country, in spite of being very good agricultural land available for agriculture, still they had to import most of these onions, dal, everything was imported. So that has been a chronic sore which has been festering in the Sri Lankan economy. And to import, obviously, you need foreign currency. And dependence on cash crops. Sri Lanka did not sort of promote daily essential items like paddy or other crops which human beings can consume on a regular basis, but they promoted more on coffee, tea and other things, mainly for export, revenue earning. It was very attractive when you earn a lot of dollars, billions of dollars in revenue, but then how do we eat? We have to use that revenue to import foodstuffs. And the only staple diet probably produced was the jackfruit. And you know, jackfruit doesn't need much effort. It grows wherever it grows. And so that was one thing which was growing in plenty. Another important thing is trade unionism, which has been a bane in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, the communism is not very, very strong in Sri Lanka. In fact, there is hardly any communists in Sri Lanka. But it is very, very, very unusual that trade unionism is, you always associate trade unionism with communism. But that's not the case there. Trade unionism is very strong. Even the doctors' trade union, which is called the GMOA, General Government Medical Office Association, is extremely strong. We cannot imagine an IMA which dictates foreign policy. They go to the extent of sometimes commenting on foreign policy and dictating some foreign policy to the government. And they're very, very strong in that. And only country probably where they have a housewives association. And it is very close to our hospital. There was Sri Lanka Housewives Association. So you know how deep the trade union culture is. That has created a lot of problems for industry and for new ventures that came in. So again, the main factors that affected the economy, the tourism, the 4 T's of Sri Lanka's economy, the revenue earning is tourism, T, textiles, which means the apparels, and T, I called it TT, inward remittances, telegraphic transfers. Sounds very, 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 very similar to what we are all familiar with in God's own country, which is almost like that. So tourism was the highest earning was $475 million in December 2018, which fell to as much as $0.5 million in December 2020. This fall in tourism started with the Easter Sunday bombings in 2019. From that time onwards, the inflow of tourism has declined dramatically. That was a devastating event. Even though about 250, quite a few people, number of people died in that bombing, but the damage done to the economy was far in excess. The image created was a disaster for the country. The Ukraine war also has affected Sri Lanka because a lot of tourists to Sri Lanka come from Russia and the Ukraine. And they used to come in loads of chartered flights, mostly Russians and Ukrainians. That has completely dried up. So the revenue from tourism has practically dried up in Sri Lanka in the last 1 year. Tea export at the peak was 18 billion. Sri Lanka is the second largest exporter and re-exporter of tea in the world. So re-exporter means Sri Lanka does not produce enough tea to meet the demands of their tea in the world. Ceylon tea is very popular. So they import tea from India. And one of my friends who is in the tea trade, he told me, we import a lot of tea from India, mix it with Sri Lankan tea and market it as, Sri Lankan tea. The packaging is very attractive. Sri Lankan tea is packaged. You see the packet, you will feel like buying Sri Lankan tea. But he says Indian tea is more flavor. But we still call it Sri Lankan tea because of these factors. So they are the largest exporter, second largest exporter and re-exporter of tea. 23% of world tea comes from Sri Lanka. After China, China is the largest exporter. But again, the growth of tea was affected by the fertilizer ban, a very ill-conceived ban by the current president, who one fine day said, tomorrow onwards, you cannot import fertilizers or pesticides. And of course, Ukraine war. Tea was also exported mostly to Russia and Ukraine. Another major export was garments, textiles, which was mainly finished goods, finished garments. Most of the big brands, they all have their manufacturing or the tailoring things in Sri Lanka. 5 billion was the export in garments. That also has been affected by the war. It was also affected earlier by the GATT, General Agreements on Tariff and Trade, where Sri Lanka had a quota. But with the GATT, the quota disappeared. So Bangladesh and India actually overtook Sri Lanka in terms of percentage of exports. And TT, which is a telegraphic transfer, inward remittance from Sri Lankans abroad. 7 billion was the revenue from Sri Lankans expatriates working abroad. But this has dried up, almost dried up. One is because lack of confidence in the economy. And worse than that, the disparity in the official and the black market rates. Official rate now is about 380 rupees, but in the black market, you will get 480 rupees. So most of them send it through what we know as the Hawala route, where you get 100 rupees per dollar more. So why would you send it through the bank? So there is no inflow of dollars again. And a hidden cost was the cost of the war. $200 billion is the estimate over a period of many years, but that is all gone from the coffers of Sri Lanka. So huge sum, which is difficult to make up. And I put this last, but I don't know whether it is really last. It's corruption. Corruption has been the main issue in Sri Lanka, especially with the, I know I'm taking a risk saying that it is this family. A lot of corruption is there. But this current Mahinda Rajapaksa family, there are 7 members in the cabinet: the finance minister, the president and the prime minister, the chief of staff, the sports minister, all of the same family, exactly. And if you see some of the messages which come through, the amount of money that has been accumulated by them abroad is unbelievably huge. So corruption certainly has played a huge role in the mismanagement of the economy and in the current position. Obviously, we cannot put a figure to corruption. Nobody knows. It is all a guesswork, but all we can say is that a huge amount of money has been taken away in corruption. So dependence on imports, I already mentioned. Importing milk is one of the main, it's a day-to-day item. And 317 million is the import bill for milk. And that's again a huge sum. Many people tried to start manufacturing. In 1997 onwards, Dr. Varghese Kurian, the Amul fame, tried to establish a milk processing plant in Sri Lanka, but he failed miserably because of one is corruption and resistance from the local import lobby. And again, trade unions. Trade unions did not allow him to succeed. Trade unions always have an anti-India attitude. Whatever the Indian government or Indian people try to do, they have a grouse. They try to stop it. So the Chinese factor, everybody knows about it, reads about it. 10% of Sri Lanka's debt is to China, but most of the money borrowed has been spent on ill-considered infrastructure projects without earning any revenue. That is the problem. So the Hambantota port, which is situated on the southernmost tip, it has got a very strategic location. India is very worried about it, but it is not a commercially viable project. Finally, they couldn't repay the loans and finally handed over to China on a 99-year lease. There is no revenue from the port now. The amount invested was huge, all borrowed from China. The Lotus Tower, which is a very beautiful tower, a landmark tower in Colombo, and it is known as a restaurant without diners. The cost is 15. It's a revolving restaurant, but nobody has ever had food there. Nobody knows what it looks like. Nobody goes there. And the Mahinda Rajapaksa International Airport in Matala, built at a cost of 200 million. It is known as an airport without planes. There are no flights which land in that airport. For many years, it was left isolated, and then they couldn't pay the electric bill and the electricity was disconnected. Finally, when Mahinda Rajapaksa ordered the Sri Lankan Airlines flight to Beijing compulsorily to land in Matala and then come to Colombo, and the passengers had to wait for 2 to 3 hours on the tarmac without doing anything, and huge cost to the airline in terms of fuel consumption and expenditure, but still it has not succeeded. India was interested in taking over that airport on a lease because the Hambantota port was nearby. But I think better sense prevailed and they didn't burn their fingers by taking over that unviable airport. The Port City project in Colombo, which has just come up, 665 acres of land was reclaimed from the sea, entirely with Chinese funds. The dream was to make it a second Dubai, to make it a financial hub. And but what they have done is they have handed over the entire control to China. Even Sri Lankan police have no jurisdiction except for murder. All other offenses will be tried under Chinese law. So that is the kind of clout with the Chinese extracted from Sri Lanka for their loans. But still, China says China has done its best to help Sri Lanka not to default. But sadly, they went to IMF and decided to default. That is the Chinese ambassador. Recently, I read in the newspaper, from the Sri Lankan newspaper, that is their comments. So Indian involvement, of course, India has got a love-hate relationship with Sri Lanka. Sri Lankans always thought of India as a big brotherly attitude towards them, whatever it is. But mostly it has been cordial. One of the sad, the low points of India's relations was during the IPKF, where India sent in troops to capture the Tamil Tigers, LTTE. But this later became a sticking point leading to the abandonment of the project. I was told by some of the IPKF senior officers, one of whom is in Bangalore, that they actually had Prabhakaran in their custody, but they were ordered to let him go from New Delhi. I mean, I cannot vouch for it, but this is direct information from senior officers who were there at that time. Another, which was a disaster, was something called India called as Operation Pumalai, but the Sri Lankans mockingly call it as Peripu drop. So that was India said we are going to help the starving people in Jaffna, and they wanted to drop foodstuffs. But eventually that also was called off because the Sri Lankans without the permission of the Sri Lankan government, they didn't appreciate it. So in the relations worsened during Mahinda Rajapaksa's first term, when he obviously had a Chinese tilt in preference to India. And at the end of the LTT came mostly because India did not interfere. They kept silent. Otherwise, it would not have been possible. The Rajapaksa supporters blamed India for his first electoral loss. They said India meddled in the elections. But probably it is partly true. I was told that there were people in the Northeast who they didn't meddle directly. They made the Tamils to go and vote. So the Tamil vote helped the opposition, the then opposition, to get a higher percentage. So in that way, probably they did in a subtle way. So we can see from this, the Sri Lankan rupee has been on free fall for a long time. Up to about this point, it has been fairly parallel to the rate, the Indian rupee. It is after that the disaster really stuck. And from here, it has been a dramatic fall. It is now 300, official rate is 320 rupees to the US dollar. But as I said, the black market rate is about 420 or something. The Sri Lanka India Society is a very oldest friendship society in Sri Lanka. I was the editor of their journal, and it is a very active society. It is very active. It's a soft power, India soft power, because a lot of Sri Lankan politicians come for the meetings. The patron is the Indian High Commissioner, who is currently the Karanjit Singh Sandhu, who is currently the Indian High Commissioner in Indian Ambassador in the USA. Anyway, that is a very active society and very well appreciated by the Sri Lankans. This is just by the way, this is during the Sri Lanka India cricket match during the ICC championship. That is me there, and that's my wife Shubha and a friend. I don't know how they got us, but we were sitting with Sri Lankan supporters. It just shows, and this was the India-Sri Lanka finals, which was a band of the first day. Sri Lanka batted full 50 overs. It's a 50-over match, and India couldn't bat even one because the rains came. So they said we will play again tomorrow. Tomorrow, same thing happened again. India batted one over, and then the match was abandoned and the trophy was shared. This was sometime in 2005 or 6 or something like that. Anyway, I was surprised when I saw in India today that I am on the, me and my wife and friend are in the cover, just by the way. So currently now to the end of the talk, this is the current Prime Minister of Sri Lanka. He has been 5 times Prime Minister before. He has a record that he has never completed this term all the 5 times. But now he also has the record that he is the only MP for his party, which was the ruling party in the previous election. But now he is the only MP, and that too, he didn't win an election. He won on a national list. They have something called a national list in which people are nominated. Those who lost are nominated as MPs. Anyway, however, he has now become the Prime Minister. But I must say, among the lot, this is my personal opinion, he is probably the more sober, not corrupt, educated, and for the international community, acceptable politician. Hopefully, he can pull it through. But I'm afraid he doesn't have the popular mandate or the popular support. But I do wish that paradise will be regained, and maybe he can take some credit for that. He comes from a very big political family, starting from Jayawardene and all that, his nephew. So we have to wish him well and wish Sri Lanka well, and hope they will get out of this imbroglio, and the financial IMF will help. India is helping. Today he announced that there is fuel only for 1 day. There is fuel for vehicles only for 1 more day. So hope, and they are hoping that India will send the required amount of fuels. The main fuel supply is got Sri Lanka IOC. This is an appropriate cartoon in which at least now India can say that we have no role in what is going on in Sri Lanka, unlike our Ramayana, where Hanuman was supposed to have burnt the Lanka. We have no role. Sri Lankan rulers did it themselves. So thank you very much for asking me to give this presentation. I hope I have been able to do justice to the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jayakishan. I think you'll all agree with me. It's been a very fascinating talk. He's covered us, taken us to the history of Sri Lanka, to what has happened and what is the economic situation, how it can improve. So before I say anything further, may I, questions, anyone?
Yeah, beautifully articulated. I think he justified all the superlatives used by Dr. Sujit Vasudevan. Kudos to you, sir. And secondly, I would like to share an important thing, connecting both cardiology and Sri Lanka. Cardiology, we have in our district a project called Gift of Life, where we give free treatment to congenital heart disease children below for free of charge. It was first done at Coimbatore. They have done more than 500, 600 surgeries. And then we moved to Amrita, where we have completed 100 surgeries this time, free of charge. And after that, now we have tied up with Rotary clubs in Sri Lanka to bring the children from Sri Lanka to do free heart surgeries in Amrita Hospital, including the travel for themselves and the bystanders. And it has just started. It is done by 3 clubs, Cochin West and Trichur West and Global, Cochin Global. So if you have any children who needs congenital heart surgery, you can recommend to any of the Rotary clubs here, and they could be given free treatment from Sri Lanka. Secondly, we also, in that project, we also give free, training for pediatric cardiac ICU staff of Sri Lanka, who can come to Amrita and do the free training. So I thought I'd share this thing, which is connecting to both cardiology as well as Sri Lanka. Thank you. It was a wonderful talk.
If you give me some more info, I'll get it from Sujit. I will pass it on to my colleagues.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Good.
Yes, Sujit, please.
Yeah, 2 things. One is during the introduction, I don't think I mentioned that Dr. Jayakishan is also a Rotarian. He's a member of the Rotary Club of Perambra, but staying in Mangalore and being a member of a club in Perambra, it's not really easy to attend. So you can claim attendance for today, JK, and say that I've attended the meeting of Rotary Club of Kochi. The second thing is that you put those 4 points right at the beginning, and when you started on this economic problem in Sri Lanka, about lack of cash crops, no industrial base, trade unionism. I think 4 points you put.
Yes, yes.
Does it sound familiar? Does it sound just like Kerala to a very large extent? This
Exactly
is
what
the
that
same
is.
situation that we have got here.
I mentioned that. It is
I'm
very
sorry,
God's own country.
Okay.
Because there are now videos circulating on WhatsApp which says exactly the same. Will Kerala go the Sri Lanka way? Just today I saw one. I will send it to you.
Okay.
It makes you think. It makes you think.
Can I ask a question, Doctor?
Yes, sure.
What is it that you think that the new Prime Minister would be able to do to get them out of this mess?
First of all, they need money. Money is the first thing, obviously, to get the IMF loans sanctioned. They have to tighten. Sri Lankans are used to a lot of freebies, just like again what Sujit mentioned. A lot of things are given away free to buy votes, and purely subsidized. All that will have to go. One of the biggest mistakes which the current president Gotabaya Rajapaksa made. He made a promise in his election. The VAT was about 28% before that. So he said he would bring it down to about 5%. And which he did, which was a disaster because there was no income. He could have, everybody makes election promises. You say that something, but you don't have to do it the very next day. He could have made it 25%. And after, if it is okay, made it gradually, people would not have complained if you didn't reduce it dramatically. Also, the other thing that he banned the biggest disaster, which they say is the sudden one fine day, the decision to ban the import of fertilizer and pesticides. He said only organic farming from tomorrow onwards. That is not practical. Nobody can, do that. And he was criticized heavily, but he is an army man. So he is not used to criticism or to listening to anybody, advisors. So he just made a decision, but now he has reversed it. It's too late. 1 year of paddy crop is gone. 1 year of tea is eaten away by pests and things like that. So how do you get revenue? You cannot. So all these will have to be reversed, and Ranil cannot do it in very easy way. And his problem is the lack of popular support. I really wish that India has to help, because now they have at least learned to look up to India for help. And I'm sure that they are doing their best, but India has got its own limitations, and we can only do so much. Unlike China, there was a time when a Chinese person was caught with a suitcase full of dollars because he was looking for someone to bribe to give a loan. So he was caught, and then he said, no. Then his explanation is, I want to find somebody to whom I can give a bribe. So far, I have not found anyone, so that they'll take a loan from China. So that is true. It is true, but may not be to that extent. But definitely, he was caught with a suitcase full of US dollars, and in a very prominent hotel, waiting for somebody, a politician. So that kind of thing. Yes.
I agree with all of your points.
Okay.
Actually, Dr. Kuan Yu, the points that he mentioned is spot on.
Yes.
Making single only was the biggest disaster that happened to Sri Lanka. It divided the country.
Yes.
And that is the beginning of the fall of Sri Lanka to a certain extent.
Yes.
Then I agree with you where Ranil Wickremesinghe is concerned. I think he is the only man who can take Sri Lanka out of this. His only problem is that he is not able to speak to the common man of Sri Lanka.
Very true.
He doesn't talk. He doesn't explain himself.
Yes.
He needs to explain a little more what he is planning or something like that, that he is there to help. One thing, because internationally, he can get loans. IMF will trust him. Everybody will trust him, and he is a good man. But the thing is, he doesn't have the popular support. Yes. Because first of all, he's too mild, and he's too, what shall I say, he doesn't explain himself to the masses.
That is very true. He's a very good, sorry, carry on.
And I also feel the younger generation of Sri Lanka, we can put some hope on them because they are educated. And if somebody explains, Ranil himself explains to the masses, the younger generation, what he has got in his mind, what he wants to do, then I feel they will be willing to listen. And like you said, I hope paradise will return, because
Yes, it has to return.
yes,
And I still, sorry, yeah. I think Mr. Stephen wants to. He's muted. He is muted.
Steve,
Stephen,
you're
unmute
muted.
yourself. Yeah.
Steve, you're
Can
muted.
you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah,
now we
yeah.
can. Now we can.
I just wonder whether you think Sri Lanka might be more dependent on China as time goes on, because the Chinese seem to be able to make more people dependent, and especially in Africa and places like that.
But I think, yes, they're always trying that, and they have tried it to a very large extent in Sri Lanka and also in Africa, like you said. But now they have realized that all is not well if you go on borrowing. China gives loans, they are ready to give more loans to repay their own loans.
Mm.
You know, that is not something which Sri Lanka needs or any, but some of the countries are now turning against the Chinese investments. Like I was reading recently, I think it is Zambia or Zimbabwe or Tanzania somewhere. They have abandoned some projects, the railroad project, which is built by China. They have realized there is no harm in building infrastructure, but if you can earn some revenue from those infrastructures. You build a port in your hometown. The Hampantota only qualification was that it is Mahinda Rajapaksa's close to his hometown. Matala Airport is also close to his hometown. Nobody wants to go there. Only tourists will go there. Colombo is the capital. It's the economic capital. It's the finance capital. Everybody wants to go to Colombo. Why build an airport, which is 200 miles away, even though the roads are good, built by Chinese. Chinese have done the infrastructure projects done by Chinese are very good. There is no doubt. But the revenue is not coming in for the country. Another thing he did was reduce the tax rate. The taxation was brought down from a very high rate to a very low rate. So the revenue earnings were not coming in. Dollars were not coming in. Sri Lankan rupee revenue was not coming in. So what do you do? And like what Sriani said, Ranil is based mostly in Colombo. He speaks only to the Colombo people. According to the Sri Lankans, he speaks only to those who live in Colombo. He speaks very good English, very knowledgeable about history and the politics of the region. He was the guest speaker at the Sri Lanka India Society. I was very impressed by his speech and his depth of knowledge, mostly about the history and the economy and all that. But unfortunately, he's not communicating to the people.
Yeah, as previous said, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Actually, President, I don't have a question. I just wanted to say that for anyone who was not really following or did not know the details of this entire crisis, I think you encapsulated the entire matter very well, talking from the history point all the way up to what it is right now today. So I want to compliment you. That was an excellent talk. Must convey to you.
Thank you. Thank you. I told when Sujit asked me, I told my wife and children, I'm giving a talk on Sri Lankan economy. So they laughed at me. They said, when did you become an economist? I said, you wait, let me finish the talk and I will share it with you. So thank you, Sujit, for this. It was a challenge.
I'll call Shubha and tell her that you spoke with.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
So you can have an extra one on me today.
I will do that, certainly.
Dr. Jaikishan, I think, while you said about the initial part and how because of the Sinhala, trying to favor one particular community went down. But there was a time, some time ago, where, apart from tourism, even there, they were into some kind of manufacturing, and the Sri Lankan tea, like you rightly said, in Ukraine and in the Central European countries, East European countries, they had actually overtaken Indian tea. You could see the advertisements, everything about Sri Lankan tea. But where did they, was it Premadasa started this downfall, or was it even before him?
No, the tea downfall was even much after, much later.
Okay.
Premadasa did not last long. He was assassinated after about 2 years in power. He did not, but the tea actually is more recent. The tea was doing very well until about 4 or 5 years ago. they were earning 18 billion or something like that from tea exports. So it is much later that the decline in the income from tea happened. The textiles decline happened earlier. That is mainly because of the agreement on tariff and trade. They lost their quotas. Sri Lanka, the garments were much cheaper than India. Now, if a shirt you buy for 300 rupees in India, you could buy for 200 Sri Lankan rupees, which is almost half of the Indian price. And most of my clothes I used to buy there. And good material, because all these branded material were all made there. So now the prices have gone up.
There were these two shops, one is Fashion House and
House of Fashion, which is very cheap, and Odell. Now there are much more. One thing about the time, sorry, yeah.
Please.
One thing
Dr.
about
Jekishan,
yes, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, you can.
Yeah.
Dr. Jekishan, it was a beautiful, wonderful talk and very informative, and it was in a very lucid style. I just want to know whether it is relating to the economic situation or not. How is the ethnic issue? Has it in any way affected this kind of a development? Or does it continue to be a serious issue as it was in the last decade?
Of course, ethnic issue is still smoldering. The war is over, but the ethnic issue is still not over. That is what actually he said it very recently, that until you solve the ethnic issue, Sri Lanka cannot prosper. See, the Tamils of Jaffna, actually again in the LTTE Tamils, if I say LTTE is a very brutal organization. They have damaged the Tamils very badly, because if not for the LTTE, the Tamils would have had more sympathy.
Yes.
LTTE has killed many of their own people. Our own classmate, one Dr. Black, he has written a small paper for our get together. What his experience, he's a Tamil, and what his experience was from the LTTE. He says Sri Lankan soldiers treated me better. So in that way, LTTE was a very brutal organization. They have killed and murdered many. They collected money left and right. They have grabbed land, property they have taken from the Tamils, not from others. But the issue is still there. And the Tamils were actually the brains in Sri Lanka earlier. If you see some of the roads, all are Tamil names. Chittambalam, that one, then this some other Mudaliar. All those are Tamil names, and they were all judges, they were ministers, they were diplomats, and even the foreign minister until about 10 years ago was Lakshman Kadir Gamar, who was the Tamil. So they were all highly educated and hardworking people. So that has been lost to the country. That cream of and a lot of money has gone out. Now they don't send, many of them are migrated mostly to Canada. The UK also, you find a lot of Sri Lankans in UK, Sri Lankan Tamils in UK, and they are very hardworking people.
Yes.
So, you cannot bring back the economy until somebody, in fact, that is another plus point for Ranil. He is the only one who tried to have an accord with LTTE, an official accord, peace accord. But actually the LTTE backstabbed him. They ran away from the accord. Otherwise, they might have had some sort of, and India was pressurizing them for the 13th Amendment, which is to give the North and East a sort of autonomy, not full autonomy. They are still pressing for it. That is another point which Sri Lankans don't like about India, why they are pressing for this, autonomy for the North and East.
Actually,
So
in the last couple of days, there was an Indian intelligence input to the Sri Lankan government that there is likely to be some kind of an action by rump elements of the LTTE. So that has caused a further stirring of this whole pot.
Yes, initially they didn't believe it, but now they've accepted it. See, in that context, the Easter Sunday bombings, it is very, the Indian intelligence had given very specific intelligence info to Sri Lanka. They have told them at 8 a.m. on Easter Sunday morning, this church will be bombed. And that warning has gone one day before and even 4 hours before the bombing. But that was not acted on. It was ignored. Why it was ignored now? Ranil was the Prime Minister and Sirisena was the President. And according to Ranil Wickremesinghe, he was not informed about it. And he was not part of the security committee or whatever it is. And Sirisena kept it secret and told his IGP, who didn't do anything. But this, now they admit it. They have got very specific information, which church at what time, and even the name of the terrorist was given to them. and that was not acted upon. So all kinds of, now others claim that there is some political hand in causing the bombing, because then that caused that regime to fall and the new regime to take over. I mean, that is all kinds of conspiracy theories. In fact, the Bishop of Colombo has said that directly. This is a political plot by the then regime to get sympathy for the others. For Rajapaksas to get sympathy, they have kept quiet about this and caused this havoc. That is a very serious accusation from a bishop. It is not to be taken, and he won't talk without some strong evidence.
Okay, last question, comments, observations.
Not a question. I don't know whether you can see this. I'll just try to show this to you.
Can I have a last question?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
What do you think, except for creating terror, what do you think was the reason behind the Easter bombings?
It was no big organization has claimed what do you call it, responsibility. It was a group of 4 people, and it is amazing that they are very, very wealthy people. This the father of the 4 brothers. The father of one of the main bomber, Hashim, I think his name is a very major importer of spices from India. He is very close to the politicians. He has got so many awards. He's a very, very wealthy guy. Their stable of cars is so many. They have got Mercedes, Lamborghinis, and Porsches and all that. And this man has turned into a terrorist, and he has gone with his own backpack. He has blown himself up in the hotel. So that is some indoctrination. They say it is indoctrinated in India by some gang, and Kerala, Coimbatore and Kerala connections are being mentioned about. I don't know about that. And again, amazing that as soon as he blew himself up, the police knew within a short time who it was. They went to his house. House was very close within the city. And his wife, who was pregnant, expecting, and 3 children were in a room. And as soon as the police knocked on the door, she blew all of them up. The pregnant woman and 3 children were all finished before the police could enter. So it's a very well planned. The father is actually, I mean, he is innocent as far as public are concerned. But it created a huge backlash on the Muslim community. Very bad backlash and violence by the Buddhist monks against the Muslims, innocent Muslims, and the banning of the burqa, which they immediately, and stopping all madrasas were closed, still closed, and they have to get, so it was a reverse effect, but it was a very devastating. Only the Taj Colombo escaped. This guy goes there with a backpack. There is a video. He is going into the restaurant, and the bag is carried by the waiter there and kept in the restaurant. And he is fiddling with his mobile phone, but the bag doesn't blow up. So he takes the bag and goes back to a small lodge a little bit far away, and there it explodes. So he is killed, and 2 other lodge, guests who were in the lodge were also killed. Luckily, the Taj Samudra escaped. Otherwise, it would have been a big disaster for the Taj.
Thank you, Dr. JK. It was an
Thank
excellent
you.
talk, and really wonderful listening to your perspective of it. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. It was my pleasure to.
Hi, JK.
Thank you.
That's
Oh, hi, Shiv. How are you? I saw your message.
Yeah, nice to hear you.
Thank you. Thank you. After a long time.
Yeah, okay. You'll all agree with me. That's been a very fascinating talk. While we'll have the formal vote of thanks coming soon, may I request you all to join me in giving a big hand to Dr. JK first.
Unmute.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
It's also time for us to greet one of our fellow Rotarians who's celebrating his birthday today. And I can see he's already got his glass open and celebrating. Please join me in greeting Rotarian Babu Rajiv on his birthday today.
Anjay man.
May I request Secretary Dr. Rotarian Rajesh Nair to formally say the vote of thanks and make his announcement.
So as everybody voiced, it was a splendid talk. And I think often an independent observer gives the best analysis of the situation out there when you're not encumbered with economics or politics. And it was a fabulous, I mean, so for somebody who's, I mean, I read quite a bit about Sri Lanka as well, but the way you've encapsulated it in such a short time, it's a fabulous one where such rich content as well. Thanks a lot, Doctor, and thank you, Dr. Sujit, for this lovely connection. The next meeting of the Rotary Club will be on the 25th. It will be a physical meeting. We'll announce the speaker during this week. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajesh. This meeting of the Rotary Club of Cochin is adjourned for interaction and fellowship.
Unmute.